Everyone, thanks for coming. This is Single Onion number 191, which is really exciting for us. My name is David Martin, part of the Single Onion board. I'm going to turn things over to Kathy Newman, and she's going to introduce our readers for this evening. We will have 2 readers and then a short break with some refreshments over on the side. There's some wine for a $5 donation. There's also coffee and water. And at the end, I'll just pop back with a few little thank yous. But for now, I'm going to turn it over to Kathy.
Thanks, David. This is a real fun night for us. Our No Dead Horses Writing Club, at the invitation of David and Kirk and Single Onion, are here in front of a public audience, and that's not something that we do every week, is it? I want to start off by introducing Dorothy Dyer, and Dorothy will give a brief history of our No Dead Horses writing group before she does her readings. Dorothy has written all of her professional life as a teacher and as a school principal. She wielded the red pen, and now she finds it kind of humbling to have her own writing scrutinized. Poetry and free verse have provided solace over the years, a means of processing emotions and dealing with life's adversities. Her early working days with animals in zoos, films, and veterinary hospitals are providing fodder for humorous, sometimes poignant memoir. Our group had a blog, and she really loved writing with a philosophical slant. And she finds that writing fiction is a challenge, whether it's flash or short. Beginnings are fun, but endings are excruciating. She's always loved the written word, and as a wannabe writer, her respect and appreciation for the work of an accomplished author has burgeoned. Joy is the process. The product, she says, good thing I've got a pension. Dorothy Dyer.
Well, one of the things a writer tries to do is pique curiosity, and our name, No Dead Horses, does that very well. People ask, where did the name come from? And we are a seniors group. And when we started writing, you wonder what's the point, but we decided that, unlike the expression, if the horse is dead, dismount, there are no dead horses in our group. We will ride on and do our best. We've existed for about 7 years. We're out of Confederation Park plus 55 Senior Center. And then through COVID and the lockdown, it was 3 of us who hung on with Zoom. And now we are relocated into the Staples building in the University District. Thank you to Kathy for that. And we've gained quite a few members, and I would dare to say we're thriving. So the spirit of writing is alive and well in the seniors. And tonight we are very appreciative of having the opportunity to share with an audience. A little bit scary, but we'll do our best, I'm sure. In my intro, I talked about the challenge of writing fiction. And so when I was trying to select something to read tonight, it would have been easy to go to some of the things that were easy for me to write. But I have chosen tonight to read something that was very difficult for me to write, and that is a short story. So I humbly submit this to you, and I'll do my best to read it in a manner that does the story justice. It's titled The Commuter. In life, there is before and after. The sliver of time in between makes the difference, a measure that might be days, hours, or seconds. Like a well-constructed play, all the pieces of the before fit together in the after, if you survive the in-between. Hannah slipped on her pink housecoat and black ballet slippers and shuffled into the kitchen, not quite awake and oblivious to the storm clouds gathering in the west. The familiar aroma of her favorite coffee eased her into awareness. Another day at work ahead of her, and the to-do list kicked in. Hannah's pace quickened as she brushed her teeth and combed her short, sensible hair. She picked a pair of black pants and dragged out a top and jacket from the overcrowded closet. When everything matched, it didn't take long to get dressed. She always picked things from the middle. The end of the rack was another life that she didn't think about anymore. A crack of thunder punctuated her mindlessness, so she grabbed the umbrella on her way out the door. The train was crowded and smelly. A light rain had started to fall, and the moisture activated the body odors of the familiar strangers gazing into space. Damn. Hannah realized she'd forgotten her lunch once again. She would have to settle for some deli sandwich, too expensive and too many calories. How much was her credit card going to be this month? She contemplated. The interest was starting to add up. The sun was rising earlier as spring attempted to make a comeback. The dirty gray streets belied the possibility of greenery, but they matched Hannah's mood and offered comfort as the worn-out storefronts and shabby apartments of the inner city zipped by. Distracted employees clambered into the elevator, juggling hot coffee and oversized bags. Hannah was the last to squeeze in as the doors closed behind and the tone announced the climb. By the time she reached her 10th floor, she had gathered herself and with an exaggerated sigh, stepped out braced for the prattle of greetings, a social requirement of her job, but one she fulfilled only out of necessity. Good morning, Hannah, chirped the effervescent receptionist. Mr. Baker asked to see you in his office as soon as you got in. She considered asking the airhead what he wanted, but knew it was only verbalizing her curiosity to someone she barely knew. This can't be good, she thought to herself, but it was worse than she ever imagined. 20 minutes later, she was cleaning out her desk and being walked to the elevator, a small brown file box in her arms with a few random possessions. As she exited the building into a downpour, she dumped the box and its contents into the trash bin. A twisted smile cut across her face as she recalled just a few weeks ago seeing another brown file box in that very trash bin, another archive of the economic downturn. The wind picked up and drove the rain in sheets across the shiny pavement as she crossed to the train station. Shivering, she waited for her line to arrive. Gazing down at the tracks, she felt a pull towards them. The world went silent, and the tug towards a sudden violent death tantalized her. How easy it would be. Divorced, unemployed, and without much family, who would care about me? News for a day or two. Hannah mused in an emotionless, logical way. The robotic voice announced the arrival of the train. Green line arriving in 3 minutes. Green for go. And she was ready. Don't do it, she heard as a gentle hand rested on her right arm. Startled, Hannah automatically stepped back and turned to see a small middle-aged woman staring at her intently. Do what? Hannah barked, stunned at the invasion of her dark space. I don't need to say it. We both know. Saying it would give it more power. Hannah glared at the unremarkable person beside her. Her plain clothes belied the wizardry that had just occurred. Come with me, she invited. Let me buy you a coffee. Tears began to roll down Hannah's cheek. In the rain, it wasn't noticeable. For the first time in a very long time, Hannah felt someone cared for her. Without questioning, Hannah followed the tiny figure. Words were not spoken until they were comfortably seated in Fresh Grinds, a coffee shop not far from the train station. The woman sat facing the wall, leaving the window view for Hannah, a view of the train platform. Hannah was convinced this seating was intentional. Her throat tightened as she suddenly felt vulnerable and exposed. The woman ordered 2 coffees and settled back in her chair. My name is Daria. What's yours? I thought you could read minds based on what you did on the train platform, Hannah sniped. But then she regretted her terseness and responded quietly. My name is Hannah. How how did you know? Hannah lowered her head as the admission brought a reality to her. The cushions were hard, the table cold, and the lights too bright. Her awareness a sharp contrast to where she might have been. Hannah looked across the street and imagined the police, ambulance, and fire trucks. And of course, the media, the flashing red lights, the shocked faces looking in grim celebration. But she was here with this strange creature, holding her hot cup of coffee with both hands and looking at her serenely. The steam fogged up her glasses as she took a short sip and carefully lowered her drink. It doesn't matter how I knew. What matters is that you are safe and free to unravel the events that brought you to this desperation. Hannah's quick temper surged as she wanted to rebuke the claim of desperation. Hannah considered that she may be hallucinating or dreaming. She stretched her hand across the table, feigning a reach for the stiff paper napkins, but aiming to brush Daria's hand. Her hand was warm and soft and very present. Daria smiled. I'm real, she confirmed. Do you believe in fate? She continued. I never take the train. In fact, I avoid it. But today my car wouldn't start and I had to take the train. I was meant to meet you today. This hocus pocus was making Hannah very uncomfortable, but she was in no position to argue. Hannah really didn't know if she would have jumped, but the force that drew her to do so was strong and strangely soothing. Daria's intervention exorcised the spell, and Hannah was emptied of the past as if she had thrown all but her body on the tracks. Here she sat, broken and yet healed. Her face softened as she spontaneously reached to hold Daria's hand. Daria flinched, took in a sharp breath, and pursed her lips. The real conversation began at that point. Hannah started talking, revealing secrets of her life that she had not thought about, let alone talked about in decades. Hannah didn't really understand why the flow of words was so easy with Daria. 2 hours and several cups of coffee later, the chronology of tragedy and trauma had laid itself out for inspection. The sexual abuse in childhood, the unfaithful husband, the alienated family, interlaced with the lesser hard knocks life can deliver. Depleted, Hannah stopped talking, realizing losing her job had not even been part of the litany of events splayed out in front of her. She took in a deep breath that acted as closing quotation marks, sat back, and looked at Daria. Her demeanor had changed. Daria slouched in the chair. Her face turned ashen, and her eyes welled up with tears. Thank you for sharing your story. Telling me will help you greatly. I must go. Daria's abrupt announcement refocused Hannah. I'm sorry. I really didn't mean for all this to happen. I would like to meet with you again, and next time I promise I won't monopolize the conversation. Could I have your phone number? The women exchanged notes, and Daria rose slowly to exit. Quelling a wave of panic, Hannah stuffed the small piece of paper in her pocket and jumped up to watch Daria leave. Her lifeline was leaving. Wait, Hannah blurted. Are you an angel? Daria laughed. If I am, then I am a cursed angel. The rain had stopped as Hannah found her way back to the train platform. The green line was coming down the tracks as she rounded the corner. The robotic voice once again announced in staccato, green line, for your safety, stay behind the yellow marker until the train has come to a full stop. Hannah examined her boots, perfectly aligned with the yellow strip, and smiled. Energized and with time on her hands, Hannah immediately launched into her Find a New Job project. She decided one of the first things she would do is clean her closet. She dug through the rack, examining each piece and recalling the memories that had knitted themselves into the fibers. The discard pile fed her sense of satisfaction. Tomorrow she would take them to the Goodwill and buy some new things for her job search. Hannah curbed her happiness just short of elation. What a day, she told herself as she dropped into the couch. She couldn't wait to see Daria again. Her new friend was amazing. Hannah had found words for the unspeakable, and each word healed as it was propelled to life by her breath. All because Daria listened. She would have Daria for dinner and give the poor woman a chance to talk. Hannah realized that all she had was her name and a crumpled paper with her phone number in her coat pocket. I'll call her tomorrow, she decided, and turned on the late news. The numbness started in her shoulders and the tops of her arms and quickly spread to her face and hands as she fixated on the screen. Lit up by flashing lights and the glazed reflection of the streetlights on the wet asphalt, a stoic reporter detailed how a woman had jumped in front of the train at the Fifth Avenue station, Hannah's station. The reporter carefully enunciated. Witnesses stated that the woman arrived on the platform as the green line pulled in and without hesitation stepped directly in front of the train. A sense of unworldliness overtook her. For a chilling moment, she was displaced. I must have jumped, Hannah cried out loud. She looked around the familiar room and reassured herself of her physical presence. As the feeling in her limbs returned, she heard the reporter wrap up with, "The victim remains unidentified. An investigation is underway. Brad Connors, CBC News." Hannah tossed the fuzzy blanket off of her lap, onto the floor, and dashed to find her coat. She had to call Daria. Why was Daria there for me, but not for this other desperate woman? She dug through her linty pocket to find the crushed paper with Daria's phone number. Trembling, she unwrapped the folds, thinking, Daria will make sense of this. Hannah expected numbers, but she saw only words. She read them twice and sobbed. Do not waste this gift. I have taken your sorrows with me. Just some background. One of the things we do in our group is we take a word and we mind map it. And the word that prompted this story was empathy. So the story is about an empath, and the idea of a commuter is to ride a train or to commute someone's sentence for death. So thank you very much for listening.
Thank you, Dorothy. I haven't heard that one before. Is it brand new? I'd now like to introduce Jean Kensit. Did I say that right? Kensit? Okay. And Jean has written here, her literary life is extremely short, she says. She noticed that while most Christmas mass missives were not gratefully received, people seemed to like hers. She was an OT in her working life, so writing was restricted to report writing and medical jargon. She did take a creative writing course at the university, but didn't find it very rewarding. 2 years ago, on a whim, she decided to join No Dead Horses. And she's enjoying the experience very much and getting in touch with the creative side of herself. And also she writes book reviews for a book club, and these very, very good book reviews that are enjoyed. And she really enjoys good authors. We really enjoyed her cooking, especially on Robbie Burns Day when she brought Scottish scones. That's right. So Jean.
Thank you, Kathy. So I have a mishmash, because I am a mishmash person. And I'm going to read you two very short poems based on the instructions that David gave an absent Jean to blend two locations. My first attempt, I didn't really succeed, but I was quite happy with the result regardless. And it's a short poem. The two locations are the top of Temple ski run in winter and a West Highland Hebridean island, extremely small, large enough to graze one sheep in summer. I stand on rock, on snow. The sun dazzling in sky of technicolor illuminates the majesty of peaks, near, far, jagged, white, facets glinting in their swimming ocean of mantled green, dark, laden with pillowy white. Feel the snow-kissed wind sweep my brow, and hear it tune its green orchestra with sighs. The sigh becomes perfume of spruce and pine. I stand on rock, on grass, softened by invisible mists. Warm sun glimmers upon the ocean's finger that stretches misty blue all around, girdled by ancient distant hills, familiar, remote, grey blue. I hear the sea slap and suck on my rocky perch. I hear cuckoo, cuckoo, eider ducks. I inhale bladderwrack, kelp, and eider duck. Wind kisses my cheek and plays in sparkling ripples near my feet. Another orchestra, a different melody. Now, that was not very good at blending locations. So I wrote a second one. And my locations for this one are a cottage in the West Highlands that looks out on a private road along which travels the local heartthrob. The second location is the foyer of the old General Hospital, the convalescent rehab building, waiting for my boyfriend to pick me up to go skiing for the weekend. And then the third location is our home in Bearspaw, waiting for the car to come home up the long driveway on a Friday. And so it's called Waiting. In sunlight, peering through lace curtains, teenage dreams. Through plate glass to swirling winter weather, swarming strangers gusting icy through wide doors, hope bubbling. Making supper in prairie winter quiet, heartache and ears pricked. Clatter of shopping carts, children's voices, neon lights, no longer waiting. In the end, I went shopping. So the short story I have here, very, very short, is that my mother's reminiscences of when she was training to become a nurse in Edinburgh in about 1925. So go back in time and place. The girl stood in the window, staring out at the dreary city street below. On the pallet bed lay the nursing uniform she would put on at 5:15 the following morning. There was an organ grinder with his blue-jacketed monkey playing at the corner. Tiptoe through the tulips came wafting up. She felt cold, anxious, and incredibly homesick. She had been away from home since she turned 14 in 1920. Her mother had found her a place in service with a wealthy family who had a house in the Northwest Highlands and a townhouse in Kensington, London. Fitting in with the staff up at Ardtornish had been easy. The cook was Highland as she was herself. She loved her walks along the loch side, past the amazing silica sands plant that kept the family in their present lifestyle. She had access to the family library, provided you kept the books clean and returned them promptly. The staff all travelled together in the train down to London. Even there, the security of the situation kept her from missing home. London had so much to show her. She was deeply shocked by the sights she saw crossing Hyde Park. Nothing like that was visible in the Highlands at all. The young footman would tease her about those Highlands. She could hardly make out his thick Cockney accent. "You call him hills, I call him mountains," he'd proclaim. She would laugh. As she grew older, she decided she would not spend her life in service. "I'll take nursing, and I'll take it in Edinburgh." It had seemed so much brighter and cleaner than grimy Glasgow. That was how, at the age of 19, she found herself standing in the nurse's residence of Longmore Hospital for Incurables, knowing not a single soul and suddenly suffering from terrible homesickness. Oh, the struggle of that first 3 months, being choked by her starched collar, her ears aching from the vast confining cap. The classes were fine. Her retentive memory, honed by screeds of memorized poetry, stood her in wonderful stead. It was the routines and procedures, the perfection demanded both in your personal appearance and in the patients in their meticulously made beds. They could not breathe during rounds. They might disturb the sheets. One particularly difficult day, the nursing sister decided to bawl out MacPhail in front of her classmates. She heard the volley of ire issue forth from that red, angry face, and she simply fainted. She came around in the utility room, and a now rather concerned sister offered her water. You can certainly correct me, just not in front of everyone. It never happened again. The nurse probationers, as they were then called, had other duties as well. One was to prepare the porridge for themselves and the staff the night before. The huge copper pots were full of cockroaches, which had to be disposed of first. Finally, MacPhail's colleague, Morton, decided enough was enough. They made the porridge, complete with its added protein. Morton, what's this? Sister held up her spoon with its offensive black passenger. Cockroaches, sister, replied Morton, who seemed not to have been afraid of anyone. The exterminator was summoned that day, and they no longer were required to make the porridge. Night shifts seemed to be the darkest time, but they were lightened by the presence of an adjacent bakery. At about 3 a.m, a tap would come to the utility room window. Upon opening it, the girls would discover hot, fresh rolls on a very long wooden paddle. Oh, the delight of hot yeasty bread. Finally, 3 months were up. MacPhail headed for home, a shepherd's cottage in a lovely glen north of the Clyde. Her mother's first words were, "Where's your paycheck?" Then there was nowhere to sleep except on the hard settee in the parlor. In those moments, homesickness fled. That was the last time MacPhail ever went home. So I have an excerpt from a much longer piece, which is meant for children, and it's called Maggie Meets a Whale. Now, Maggie is my alter ego, and our family always took our holidays in the West Highlands of Scotland, in the most remote place we could find. And this place happened to be a long Scottish sea loch with no roads on either side of it, and the only way to get there was by boat. And the only way you got around when you got there was also by boat. And something happened towards the end of that holidays. Towards the end of the holiday, they headed once more across the loch to Maggie's favorite beach at Inveree. The weather was rather cool, and they noticed in the distance a grey hump breasting the light chop of the water. What is that? They were halfway across when Maggie saw from amidships the great grey something rise up, higher than the bow. Ronald, in front, turned his head, his brown face a pale green. Mum exclaimed something in Gaelic. Then the great grey shape, with its dorsal fin, rose right beside Maggie. She felt more amazed than fearful. It was a whale. They fled on their way, their mother too scared to turn the boat around. She was convinced that one flick of its tail would render their boat to matchsticks and send them all to the bottom. Besides, she could not swim. Dad seemed less concerned. When they reached the shore, all eyes remained glued to the loch. They could see its patrol. I think it has come into the loch after fish, but cannot find its way out, Mum decided. Dad said nothing. Whoops, that's not there. Whoops, pardon me. For the return trip, Mum watched until she thought the whale had passed the bay. It was then pack up and into the boat, start the motor, and race for home. A small outboard can only go so fast. Maggie felt they were like ants crossing a very large floor before the mop descends and sweeps them up. They reached the safety of Tarbert and did not put to sea again until they had not seen that whale for 2 whole days. I think it is gone, Mum declared. The next trip was to a much closer beach. Checking their crab pots en route, several large partons were in the pots. Off to the shore, fetch driftwood, make a fire, boil up the jerry can, and in with the crabs. The chill feel of autumn was in the air, and while waiting for the crab al fresco, a school of porpoises came leaping from the water. Her shivering forgotten, Maggie gasped at such a display. She felt awed and privileged to be seeing these creatures in Scottish waters. She had never, ever heard of them being there, nor of whales for that matter. They left Tarbert 1 week later, Maggie's luggage laden with green glass fishing floats and many scallop shells she had found behind the croft. Their mother felt in need of pampering, so they stayed in the hotel in Malik for a few nights. Children have to be seen and not heard in Scottish hotels, so best behavior was on the menu for breakfast and dinner, and any time in the lounge. Lunches were still the picnic variety. Their mother had to get new shoes in which to look respectable. Being slightly too big, she called them her Malik boats. The children's raincoats could never pass muster. Doused as they were with salt water, fish guts, and scales, they must have smelt terrible. But they all took perverse delight in scampering down to the shared bathrooms in them, the malodor flying in their wake.
This is what Pat has written. In a city far, far away in a time long, long ago, there was born a baby girl who was destined for stardom. The only problem was that her parents were not in California, they were not rich, and they were not famous. So she grew up in Calgary, went to university for far too long, and in the States as well, she graduated with a degree that is commonly translated as piled higher and deeper. This is our satirist over here. She's worked as a teacher, a trainer, a management consultant, and eventually a management coach. Currently, she's retired, living in a senior's residence and looking for inspiration among the 90-year-olds. Pat sponsors a group in the manor, a writing group in the manor. So she comes to our writing group, but she also sponsors another group where she resides. And we're watching for a book from Pat with manor stories.
Thank you. Well, with that introduction, I have to give you one of my manor stories. And I thought if the group that was listening was going to be very, very young, I would have read you a blog that I had written about how I have now become an old fogey. That might give them some advanced information. But instead, I will give you a short story I wrote called All That Glitters Is Not Old. One would think that at age 82, I would have learned that appearances can be deceptive. Skim milk masquerades as cream, apparently. The manor represents itself as the apex of senior retirement living programs, activities, full 24-hour health services, safety in an elegant setting. The reality proves to be a touch more prosaic. Walkers, wheelchairs, and a number of slightly vacant early dementia residents who remember all the elementary schools they have ever attended, but can't remember what they said 5 minutes ago. This is the newest seniors fad, aging in place. The idea, to the outsider at least, is appealing enough. You can stay here until you pass on or over, or however the brochures deal with death. They never mention that word, of course. That is because the marketing is made to the kids of old people. The seniors don't have a difficult time talking about death. We know that our time here is limited, and all of us have spent our lives dealing with it. Our parents, siblings, perhaps partners, and sometimes children. No, we are no stranger to death. Most of us, truth be told, are quite envious of Jack, who died in the middle of the Friday night film night in a lovely soft chair in the darkened theater. Of course, he wasn't found until the end of the film, when his personal assistant came to collect him and wheel him back to get upstairs. But that was Jack, always thoughtful. I had made the decision to move to a senior's residence, 3 meals a day, sweet cleaned, trash removed. What more could anybody hope for? You might deduce from this that I am not a typical domestic goddess. And you would be absolutely right. I am the type who brings pickles and buns to a potluck supper with the enthusiastic agreement of all participants. Witnessing wheeling into supper that first night was an out-of-body experience. There I was back in the first day of high school once again with my bagged lunch while all the cool kids were going through the cafeteria buying chips and gravy. I digress. There were no cafeterias lined, nor were there any empty tables, but there were some that had only 2 or 3 people there. Who to join? Which ones look sentient? If I selected the wrong table, would I do to sit there at that spot until it expired? The dilemma was quickly solved. That spot is safe for somebody. God, deja vu. Perhaps I could just reel out, slapping my hand to my forehead, as if I had forgotten something very important. The dining room manager, quickly steered me to another table with 2 ladies who proved to be more sociable. Friendly? Yes. Welcoming? Absolutely. Could they hear at a normal speaking level? Well, not a hope. Consequently, table conversation speaking level, which consisted mostly of their asking questions about who I was, where I lived, did I have kids or grandkids, and what did my husband do, was conducted at roughly the same decibel level as a modified Harley. I value my privacy, and I knew that whatever I said would be shared with a large number of tenants, female tenants, if not the diners at the 6 closest tables. Should I make up an existence that would both satisfy them right then and there and give me at least a modicum of prestige? But it's so hard to remember the names of non-existent kids, their ages and gender, a fictional husband, and his imaginary career, or the company that he works for, let alone the certain cities or imagined countries where we might have traveled. Damn, I should just have made up a family, killed them off in some sort of catastrophic accident, and made up on the set a feeling that my countenance would reveal the deep sorrow that I felt. Or I could tell them that I just got out of prison Muhammad High. And all my family had disowned me and never visited me for 15 years and let them draw their own conclusions. Probably time for me to start being honest, though, if I were going to if I was going to spend the rest of my days in this place. No kids, no husband. Silence. And food. Following supper, I consulted the activity board. Bridge night. I lay no claim to being an expert bridge player. My game would best be described as kitchen bridge. But I had learned not to trump my partner's ace and to keep track of trump. Down again. It looked as if I had suddenly been transported to the local country club. The positive was that it didn't make any difference where you sat, since the winners rotated after 4 hands. The negative was that they all seemed to know every convention and bidding product around. Blackwood, check. Seaman, check. Jacoby, check. These, it appeared, were just cunning ways to pass on information about one's hand to the partner. Something everyone but me knew exactly what was meant. I couldn't understand why they just couldn't say, well, I have 3 diamonds. Or, Molly, I only have 2 aces. The evening did not go well, nor was I warmly encouraged to come back the following week. To be fair, no one actually told me that I should have bid or what card I should have played. They did, however, have that long-suffering expression down to an art form. It consisted of a slight smile, no teeth showing, along with a head tilt at exactly 52 degrees. And I consoled myself with the thought that things would be better the next day when I took the exercise class. After all, in my previous life, when I was young and thin, I had taught phys ed in high school. Wrong again. There we were, 15 of us in the activity room, wheelchairs, walkers, canes, and a very enthusiastic instructor. What is it about dealing with seniors that people feel that they have to behave, always have to be upbeat and positive with chirpy and the use of we? Be careful, ladies. We don't want to take a tumble now, do we? I sang silently. Who wants to tumble, tumble, tumble now? Who wants to tumble down? Fortunately, nobody tumbled, but there were a couple of near misses. Mabel tried to touch her toes and nearly fell face forward out of her wheelchair. Pearl left the brakes off her walker and had to chase it across as it escaped her grasp when she went up to get it. That drew an admonition from the instructor. Always put the brakes on. Now, class, what do you remember about setting the brakes? Always put the brakes on. Came a chorus of about 5 thin, reedy voices. I guess, Peter, don't be a dumbass, was not the correct response. Needless to say, I had to watch my mouth. Although recently I have been thinking about 100 years ago, folks might casually use the N word, but never the F word. Now this is reversed. Come to think of it, to date, I have never heard any profanity used here at all. Maybe that is why there are so many pursed lips. Everyone is trying to keep all the swear words tightly wound inside of them, when in actuality they are close to bursting to get out. Surely I can't be the only one who thinks that the husband who pushes his wife's wheelchair into a table twice is a fucking idiot. I strategized about supper. If I got there first and grabbed the table for 2, then people were free to join me or not. I was surprised then to hear a deep voice asking if he could join me. Sure, I said, looking up and encountering a rarity, a full head of silver hair. You're Dr. Wilson, aren't you? The psychologist. I glanced down at my name tag to make sure. Well, I am for this week, and you are, he smiled, excellent quality false teeth. I'm Roger Hastings. You are probably wondering why I invited myself over to have dinner with you. Since we haven't met, it's probably not for my sparkling wit, so it must be for my enchanting beauty. He looked a little nonplussed, but tactfully avoided the issue of beauty or lack thereof. Maybe it was the blue jeans and t-shirt that read, "Let loose the dogs of war," I was wearing. Actually, it's for your professional advice. You see, he blurted out, obviously anxious to get his dilemma out in the open. I'm being stalked. Fortunately, the server came over to take our dinner order, so I had a moment or two to stifle what I was going to say. You see, he hurried on, there are far more women than men living in here, and single men appear to be a precious commodity. She shows up to every activity I go to, says my table for supper, invites me to her room for tea. And here he visibly shuddered, suggested that we go for a Sunday afternoon drive. You can't shake her, I said. No, even when I go for a walk, she is a ferocious walker, by the way, but grabs onto my arm to keep her from slipping, she says. Clearly suggesting a restraining order was not going to work. And homicide is not an option. He looked appalled and moved his chair ever so carefully back and bent over, pretending to retrieve his napkin. I remembered one of my cardinal rules when dealing with patients: no jokes in the first session. No, just a little joke. He looked dubious. So it sounds as if you are not looking for a relationship, but you are worried that this woman is. Yes, I don't want to be rude or anything, but my partner died 6 months ago, and I'm just not ready to start anything again. I'm sorry? Yeah, we were together 20 years, long before it was fashionable. I may be retired, but I'm not stupid. In that case, you could just tell her about your loss as much as you wish to reveal, and tell her honestly that you're not looking for another relationship. Well, he began awkwardly. I was hoping that you might talk to her for me. I've always believed that brevity is the soul of wit. No, I said. His shoulders slumped, and I was certain I could see tears beginning to form in his eyes. It would be much better if you told her about yourself and your former partner. After all, you were sufficiently brave to live together with your partner for 20 years. How hard can this be compared to that? Besides, what's the worst that could happen? She'd ignore me from now on, I guess. She wouldn't come to exercise class with me, or ask me out for Sunday drives, or want to go for long walks. He visibly brightened. Sounds like a problem solved to me, I said. Pushed my chair back, grabbed my walker, gave him a big wink, and tottered out.
So everybody should pick up at No Dead Horses so that you can come and join us and listen to this lady. Go, Sadie.
Well done, Pat. Thank you. There's going to be more manner stories too. I just know it. Well, I'm Kathy Newman. I've always loved listening to and telling stories. Sinking into a good book is a special pleasure, and motivating students to express their thoughts and ideas through writing was a rewarding challenge. Now that I've retired from teaching, I refer to myself as a writer. For the first time, even though putting thoughts on paper has always been my way of reflecting. I especially enjoy creative nonfiction as I can draw from my own life events and experiences. However, some moments are easier to express through poetry. I had the pleasure of working with a teaching colleague by the name of Marquita Hustad. She heard about a group called the Skyline Hikers and suggested that we challenge ourselves to a whole week in the mountains. That was back in the summer of 1990. And I discovered that a whole week in the mountains, that nature was my muse. Poetry on the rocks. A natural hard chair, lots of paper, a pen, beautiful scenery, the company of a friend. Some conversation, marmot motion and sound. It's true, there's poetry all around. One of the hikers, was spending one afternoon just watching marmots. There were so many of them on the mountainside. So I wrote a poem called Murray Talks to Marmots. Murray talks to marmots, and they listen too, just as if they know that what he says is true. He's got his camera ready and he keeps his body still, but his words flow freely, drawing the marmots from their hill. I moved a little closer to hear his words of gold. He must be speaking wisdom for the marmots to be so bold. They came by the dozens wrapped up in their furs. Their eyes shone intently as they listened to his words. Murray's voice was warm and gentle, and his words were good to hear. He told the waiting marmots that he was glad that they were here. He said, "Your playfulness brings out the best in humankind. It helps man to forget the worries on his mind." "Is that why they take our picture?" one small marmot asked with glee. "Yes," said Murray, "and besides, you're beautiful, you see." So the marmots posed for pictures and did not ask a fee. Humans were delighted. Cameras clicked in harmony. Murray taught me a lesson I'll remember all my days. It's important to talk to marmots and tell them of our ways, for it's only in understanding that we begin to communicate. Murray bridged a gap and opened up a gate. Also, when we were on the mountain, it was very soon after my divorce, and so this poem relates a little bit to that, but also to the fact that with the Skyline hikers, Brewster trail riders take all of our belongings in on horseback, so we were surrounded by cowboys. So I tried some cowboy style poetry. This one's called The Edge. I'm slipping, going down fast. There's nothing to hold on to. The ice is as slippery as glass. Dig in, they yell from above. I scramble and do what I'm told. I kick in with my spurs and finally my heels grab a hold. I freeze and look down at where I was going. A cliff edge with no return. Ropes are thrown to me and I'm hauled up from a hard lesson that I have learned. When I'm sliding and nothing holds me back, I have to trust myself to get back on track. I really enjoyed meeting the people that were on this hike, and one gentleman in particular really impressed me. This is called, and actually this one was motivated by one of our writing prompts. The elderly man turned and smiled. After 2 hours of walking Alice the Aussie Doodle and then Gordon the Westie, I needed a cup of hot pepper tea, a cozy chair, and a good story. However, as soon as I gave into that cozy chair, my osteoarthritis told me to get up and move again. So I complied, stood up to exercise the F key chords on my new ukulele. Barry Luft, the incredible Duke of the Uke, is my instructor and said that playing the ukulele will take one's mind off aches, pains, and worries, and he is right. Learning new chords while singing familiar songs is completely absorbing and much better than absorbing junior for my aging physical education teacher joints. Keep moving and keep thinking while having fun seemed to also be the motto of the Skyline hikers. When I was a fit 40-year-old, Marquita, my teaching partner, and I challenged ourselves to a week of mountain hiking with the Skyline group. Halfway through the week of daily excursions, I learned an important lesson when the elderly man ahead of me on the muddy, slippery trail stopped, turned, and smiled at me. Out of breath, I stopped too and whispered, "Oh, I'm really glad you stopped. Uphill in mud is hard work. I have to catch my breath." His response was one that I'll never forget. "Oh," he said, "I just thought I'd better let my pacemaker catch up." He was in his 80s and still loved hiking in the mountains, even though he'd undergone heart surgery. Evening campfires were part of the mountain hiking fun too, as stories were told and songs were sung. At the end of our fresh air week, our oldest hiker at 95 years young gave us this announcement. This will be my last skyline hike. Next summer, I'm joining the elder hostel group as they sleep in real beds at night. Camping on this hard ground, even with a good full-mate, just isn't good for these old bones. Another lesson well learned. When physical limitations interfere with past fun, find a new solution, but don't stop moving. Turn your life around and smile. Now, dogs are relentless taskmasters, so later in the day, I walk again. But tomorrow, I will head for the relaxing warm water of the Cova Pool for a deep water workout that my joints just seem to love. This is in a different location. I had the privilege of spending time in Antigonish, Nova Scotia. I called this driving the tractor, but it could also be called city girl. You can't roller skate in a buffalo herd, but you can be happy if you've a mind to. Kathy, quit singing and concentrate. The tractor is slipping backwards. Oh, quickly I pulled on the steering wheel as I stood up, putting my full weight on both the clutch and the brake at the same time. This worked as the tractor became still and Bonnie stopped yelling. I had been asked to drive while Bonnie and her brother loaded the hay wagon being pulled by the tractor. Being a city girl from Alberta, where the wheat fields stretched for many flat miles, I had innocently agreed to help out. It would have been hard to say no to Bonnie, as Bonnie, her mom, Hazel, and her younger brother had warmly welcomed us when we rented the neighboring farmhouse for our 2-year stay in Antigonish. However, I should have said no. I had no idea that Nova Scotia had fields. Hay fields were made up of rolling hills. They were definitely not flat. Besides, I'd never driven a tractor. Bonnie gave me a quick driving lesson and a warning about the weak brakes. As I drove, I listened to Bonnie's instructions about when to stop, when to go. Looking over my shoulder, I was in awe as Bonnie threw bales of hay effortlessly onto the flatbed wagon. She worked on one side and her brother on the other. Paying attention after that first lap in concentration meant that all went well for a while. However, the dark clouds that had been visible in the distance were now above us, and rain began with a vengeance. Soon the hayfield was reduced to mud, and there was no way that any amount of pressure on the brakes would hold the tractor on the slope. This time, I was the one yelling, "Bonnie, I can't hold it." Jumping out of the way of the wagon as it was pushed backwards by the tractor, Bonnie and her brother flew into action. This was their world, and something like this must have happened before. Gingerly, they grabbed blocks of wood from behind the seat of the tractor, jammed them behind the tractor wheels. I kept my stance on the tractor brakes and clutch and almost fell forward as the tractor came to an abrupt halt. Bonnie took over the driving and was able to turn the tractor so that it could traverse the hillside. Her brother had detached the flatbed and covered the hay bales with a tarp. Jump on the back. This was easier said than done, but with a helping hand from her brother, I settled in for the bumpy ride back to the barn. We were drenched. Hazel made us steaming cups of hot chocolate, which we enjoyed in front of a wood-burning kitchen stove. "So," Bonnie said, we aren't finished yet. Can you come back tomorrow, please?" "Oh, sure," I replied. I was an experienced driver now. When David was with us, David Martin came as our guest speaker to our No Dead Horses Riding Club, and Jean tried one of the 2 places, and I tried one as well. And this is the interrelation of 2 different places. This one's called Classroom Hive. A hive gathering workers, a queen and drone, some in colorful array, some with patched knees. There are the bees, the school bees, A's and D's. A horrid buzzing with industry stopped by a bell, a toll to leave. From a distance, silence. A whisper of a wing clinging to a flower, needing nectar before returning to the hive. A new day dawns. More honey is made with the pollen of thought. We really enjoyed David's visit. It did motivate a lot of writing. And just before I leave you, this is from all of us. Back to the mountains where a little flower is peeking out from the rocks. Forget me not with eyes so yellow, peeking out as if to say, please don't forget us today. Thank you.
Thanks so much, Kathy. And thanks to all our readers this evening. That was really wonderful. Just a couple of housekeeping things and then we'll send them your way. We want to give a big thanks to our sponsors with Single Onion. We received some support from the Canada Council for the Arts, the League of Canadian Poets, the Writers Guild of Alberta, and especially for this evening, the Calgary Arts Development. We also want to give a big thanks to Shelf Life Books for being our host for many, many years. Yeah. I want to say a big thank you to the whole Single Onion team, Kirk Miles, Paul Marshall, Lori Roadhouse, Josephine LeRae, Paul Kelly, and Bill Lawrence. And if you want to find out more about the Single Onion, you go to singleonion.com. We're on Facebook. If you go to our website, we've got an email list that you can sign up for and once a month get a little message about what we're up to. And we're on Twitter. Our next event will be April 20th back here at Shelf Life Books. And we're partnering with Ice House Press, which I think they're actually based out of Newfoundland. They're somewhere from the East Coast, but they have 4 poets that they're kind of arranging who have recent books that they're going to be sending to us to read for us. So I'm really excited about that. Kind of bringing poets from across Canada, and I think that's about it. So yeah, thanks again for coming out. Thanks to the people who are joining us online, and thanks to Shelf Life Books, and have a wonderful evening.